you were very right when you said that most people are not aware of the land office. Um, in a nutshell, for our readers, if you had to explain why it's an important office, and again, if you would reiterate, not what caused you to run, but why you're running and why it's important to you.
Sure. Okay. The commissioner, the Texas Land Commissioner, is an extremely powerful position in the state. It's the oldest continuous elected office in the state of Texas. We had a land commissioner before we had a governor. The commissioner is the fiscal trustee for $29 billion worth of state assets. This includes the land that we have. It also includes any royalties that are gained from mineral exploration and exploitation, or any leases that are gained from the land. Also, the commissioner is responsible for about 3,300 miles of shoreline on the Gulf of Mexico, and up to and including 10 and a half miles out into the Gulf. Most states only go out 3 miles. That's their responsibility. But when Texas changed from being a republic to being a state, they negotiated that they would continue to have the boundaries that nations have, which is 10 and a half miles. So a lot of this, and that's important to know because this exploration and exploitation currently is not allowed further out into the Gulf of Mexico. It's limited. And my opponent in this race actually wants us to be able to do more exploration and exploitation and use fracking in the Gulf, which we're learning that fracking is dangerous enough on land. And so I would be an opponent of having it take place out in the Gulf of Mexico. Also, during the last legislative session, there was a movement to renegotiate the Texas Open Beaches Act, which the state of Texas has identified. When they passed that act, they said nobody can cut off access to a public beach. So you can't have any kind of real estate development, whether it's residential or commercial, that would cut off access to the public of our public beaches. Our beaches are an extremely valuable asset for ecotourism. Creates thousands of jobs, generates millions of dollars. So we need to make sure that we don't just turn our public beaches into something that is a boon for corporate Texas, but not a boon for the people of Texas. So I'm really an environmentalist at heart, and for example, when the state of Texas was looking at putting a nuclear waste dump in Sierra Blanca, my wife and I walked almost 100 miles in protest from El Paso to Sierra Blanca to prevent that waste dump from being built. When ASARCO wanted to renew their permit for their smelting operation, which had been dormant for 10 years in El Paso, I convinced the city council to spend $1 million in legal fees fighting it. And our biggest opponent in that was the Texas Commission for Environmental Quality. Why the city of El Paso had to take on the state of Texas in order to keep polluting smelter from opening its doors again is almost beyond belief that would end up happening. But it did happen. So my environmental record is a clean one. I mean, I not only walk the walk and talk the talk, I do both.
Very good. Is there one responsibility as land commissioner that, I'll say, heads and above, would be most important to you? Is it maintaining something? Is it changing something? I know you spoke about the beaches, and you spoke rather disturbingly about fracking and the effect on the environment and the water. Could you expand a little bit on that? And is that what you feel is the most important thing, or the most important responsibility that the land commissioner has, is the protection of the environment? Money is important,
right,
but once that environment is destroyed, getting it back again.
I would say this, that if you want to, when you have a political race going on and you have two candidates, there's actually a couple of other independent candidates are out there, but he and I are the front runners in this contest. But it serves you well to actually compare what both candidates are saying about the same subjects. Now, I've asked him if he would participate in a series of debates. He hasn't even responded to me. I suggested in 10 different cities, some of them Republican strongholds, some Democratic strongholds. But I think that the issues that really are going to separate the two of us in this is not our passion for veterans, it's not our passions about education, it's our passion about the environment. That I'm not willing to sacrifice the environment in order to meet the fiscal goals of the state of Texas to generate income for public education. So I think that, to me, then, in this particular contest, that's probably the most important aspect. The commissioner needs to be an environmental steward for for these public lands. And he's the fiscal trustee, not just to generate the money, but he also has a tremendous environmental responsibility.
Very good. I want to phrase this politely, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. Looking at your campaign, it appears to me on not first glance, but that you're interested in the job, and perhaps your opponent might be interested in it as a stepping stone. Am I accurate in that, or I do not want to put words in your mouth?
Well,
You
we've
do
actually
understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, we've actually come out in one of our fireside chats and alluded to that fact that I'm not using this as a stepping stone. Of course, if you connect the dots, then you would say, well, John's saying that his opponent probably is. I don't know for a fact that he is using this as a stepping stone. Maybe he would be very comfortable staying as the land commissioner for the rest of his life. He's not, he's very careful about his interaction with the media right now, which you would think for a statewide candidate who might have higher political aspirations would really want to get out there and express his opinion about things that are important to the state, not just to have campaign slogans that says, I'm the pro-life, the pro-gun, the pro-energy independence candidate. I'm fighting for education and veterans issues, and please don't ask me any more questions. I mean, he may have higher political aspirations, but he's not showing people what he's made of unless he's willing to do things like participate in a debate with a candidate who has less money than he has, but who has more of a command of the issues than he has.
And you're saying they haven't even responded to your...
They haven't even answered. I sent him a congratulatory letter right after the primaries, congratulating him on winning the primary, and saying that the people of Texas deserve to hear from both of us on important issues. And I highlighted some of those, including fracking, including water resources, and including funding public education. So he hasn't seen fit to answer that. As a result, we have actually put a thing on our webpage for a petition for people to sign encouraging him to participate in the series of debates. Now, in my letter to him, I suggested 10 cities, but told him that I was willing to accept any cities that he would identify. So if he takes 10 other cities he wants to go to, or he only wants to do 5 cities, or 3 cities, or he wants to do 12. I mean, when Jerry Patterson ran for this office, they had a series of 12 debates. So I would think that somebody with the name Bush would want to show what he's made of and get his name out there for public recognition. And if he really does want to step up to a higher office, he owes it to the people of Texas who would want to support him for that, to step up to the plate now and be a real leader, not be somebody who's just using scripted speeches and controlled media opportunities.
Is it a machine?
I'm sure. Well,
You have in our mention this to our readers. You brought your highly paid staff, who's in here with us now. But when you mentioned in one of your fireside chats, David and Goliath, you really couldn't have picked a better comparison. You are up against not only a statewide machine, you are up against a national
Right.
machine.
People who know how to do it. I mean, these guys have been there, done that. They've won 2 presidential elections. They've won a governor's race in Florida. So and this is my first foray into a statewide race. I mean, I've done the grassroots knock on the doors, 17,132. Never forget that number. But this race is a lot different. But we have a strategy. I'm a pretty fast study. And our strategy is to use the F-150 tour across Texas, trying to get out there and talk to, mainly to Democrats, but I'll speak to independents and Republicans too, about my vision for the state, my vision about education, my vision about the environment, my vision about the veterans programs that fall under the General Land Office. That's what I'm going to do. And then secondly, we have a really strong social media campaign that we're running. Megan is extremely smart when it comes to using things like Twitter and Facebook. She says, you give the speeches, you get grandma to take the pictures, and I'm going to get them posted. So, I mean, she's doing a great job of that. If you look at the Obama campaign, that's what they did. They used very strong social media. So we've used that as a blueprint for our success. And it's no secret that that's what we're doing. I mean, my opponent can say he doesn't have to send spies to find out. I'll just come right out and tell him. We're using social media and grassroots campaigning. And we're not worried about raising a lot of money.
How has the response been as you've traveled the state?
You know, it's in some places it's been extremely positive. For example, the folks in Denton were very positive. There was a small community between Fort Worth and Dallas that turned out 65 people who are excited about the possibility of Democrats taking over the state of Texas finally. Other places, you know, the turnout, I think when the earlier in our campaign that we were, the turnout was lower. Historically speaking, just studying political campaigns, the real campaign season kicks off after Labor Day. That's when people really start paying attention to what's happening. And we've seen that, you know, the very little interest back in January, February, March, April, May, June, a little bit more, July, a lot. And then now we'll see what happens in August and in September. We should be going full bore by September.
I want to ask about your comments and your I'll say ethical pledge. Is your ethics faith-based, or is it just something that you were raised with? And how are you applying it to your political campaign differently than what, if I'm understanding correctly, differently than your political opponent?
Okay. I've always been an ethical person. It's the way my parents raised me. And there's, you know, that old expression that the fruit doesn't fall too far from the tree, and of course the exception to that is if the tree's on a hill, then the fruit can roll down the hill. But my parents raised me to always be proud of being an ethical person. As I told in my speech earlier, to do what's right and try to make it popular rather than what's popular and try to make that right. So that's been what I've guided my life on. It's the way I've raised our 6 children. It's the way I talk to my grandchildren. I would rather be on the losing side of the right argument than on the winning side of the wrong argument. So to me, no political race has ever been about winning. It's been about running. So you run the race, you have your plan, and I'm also a very spiritual person. I pray every day. I have never prayed that I would win an election. I always prayed that God's will would be done. And that's encouraging because then if you win, you feel like that's God's will. But if you lose, you're okay with that because that was also God's will.
You know that Killeen, Harker Heights, Temple, Belton, Lampasas, this whole area, this is a military community. This is an Army community, not only active, as you well know, but also many retired. You are combat vet, Vietnam.
Right.
What is it that this military community, why should they look to you as this candidate, and why, in regards to military and service and those things, why should they vote for you?
Okay, I would say this, and I've said this publicly at many of the forums that I've been to, that my opponent in this race also has a military history. He served his nation in Iraq. I served mine in Vietnam. So I think both of us are patriots, and I would never take that away from him and say that I'm a better person because I'm a Vietnam combat vet. And I can tell you that there are some really extremely important programs that fall under the Land Commissioner's responsibility that Texas should be very proud of. They're probably some of the best in the nation as far as taking care of our veterans. Let me tell you about three of them. The first one is the Texas Veterans Cemetery Program. We have 4 Texas Veterans Cemeteries that augment the 4 national cemeteries that are in the state of Texas. But we probably need more. For example, the folks up in Amarillo asked the last legislature if they could get one, and they were pretty much told you would have to maintain it yourself if you put it in. So part of what I've told them I would do is I would research and find out, is there really a formula for who does what? Because it was my understanding that this falls under the same thing as the National Cemeteries Program, and local communities aren't being asked to maintain those. It falls under the Veterans Cemetery Program. Second one is Texas Veterans Home Program, and these are veterans homes for like a nursing home for veterans. We have one in El Paso. I've been a visitor to it many times. My wife and I have actually prepared home cooked meals there for some of the veterans and go and sing to them and get other people to come and do entertainment for them. This is a good way for us to show that we really care about our veterans when they come home. The third program is one that we should probably be the most proud of, and that's the Texas Veterans Land Loan Program. During the foreclosure debacle, during the economic recession that we just went through, the lowest foreclosure rate in the nation was the Texas Veterans Land Loan Program. And the reason for that is when veterans ended up in trouble, we would renegotiate the terms of their loan with them so that they wouldn't lose everything that they had already invested. This is a shining example for the rest of the state. So on the veterans issues, I would say my opponent and I, we're equal. We're both very passionate about it. I mean, he has a family history of people who have served in the military. So do I. My dad served on the USS Flasher during World War II, won the tonnage record for the most Japanese ships sunk during the war. Everybody who served on a submarine in World War II was a volunteer, and half of the fleet was lost. More than 50% of our submarines never came home. So my brother and I both served in Vietnam at exactly the same time. I had to sign a waiver to go.
Where were you in Vietnam?
Quang Ngai Province.
Help us out on the map, north, south, near the DMZ.
It's near Chu Lai, I guess would be the largest military base. It's,
Okay.
matter of fact, that where I served was along the Batangan Peninsula, which is where the village of My Lai was.
Okay.
So,
Sure.
you know, to put it into perspective.
Okay.
So, and then, you know, our son John just returned from he retired after a 25-year career in the Air Force and Army, and he just finished his combat tour in Afghanistan.
Afghanistan.
So our family has a proud tradition of military service, but so does the Bush family, and like I said, I would never take that away from them. Veterans issues are not something either one of us are going to argue about, because we're both very passionate about it.
Does the land commissioner and does that office? Let me back up on the question. How is Fort Hood, if it is, affected by decisions that come from the commissioner and the office, or is it just on its own and it's over there, or
Well-
is there a relationship there that can affect Fort Hood?
Yeah, probably not. I mean, Fort Hood already has one of the four Texas veteran cemeteries. I mean, it's been built here. I haven't heard that there's a demand for a Texas veterans home here, but that might be something that they want. But really, I don't see any great impact to anybody by whether the Democrats or the Republicans are in control, unless it comes to the wanting to build additional facilities. And remember, a lot of these programs that I just mentioned were actually started by Democrats, and they've been supported by Republicans. So we have both. I think when it comes to veterans issues, both parties agree that we need to do things for our veterans when they're coming home. I don't know that there's a program that we currently have that impacts active duty. It's more like what impacts people who are getting out of active duty and coming into civilian life and then getting older, passing away and needing a cemetery to be buried in for their family. But I think bipartisan-wise, that's an issue that's joining the country together, not separating it.
Very good. Is there anything that we haven't spoken about that is important to you in your campaign that you'd like to point out, or
Just that it is a grassroots campaign, and that our goal is we've been to more than half of the counties in Texas right now. We're getting to see what's impacting people's daily lives. A lot of it is not something that really falls under the purview of the land commissioner and the general land office. But remember that the commissioner ends up getting a bully pulpit with the office if he wants to use it. So even if it's something that has to do with veterans but has nothing to do with the general land office, for that land commissioner to get up and speak to those issues, representing the veterans community that he's a member of. And I'm a life member of the American Legion Post, the VFW Post, and a Vietnam Veterans Post. So I mean, and I didn't do that just when I got elected either. I mean, this was something that I had a long-term commitment for.
anything else that you would like to mention? Anything else that, like I said, that we haven't discussed? Or?
No, I think we're just excited about a grassroots campaign. We've washed a lot of bugs off the windshield. Some places in Texas have more bugs than others. So we're just having a ball.
There is one thing I would like to mention.
Sure.
Or ask you about. I don't know if it affects the land office or the commissioner. You would know much better than I would. But you talked about the bully pulpit, so the current crisis, my term, on the border right now with immigrants, I'll just say illegal immigrants crossing, does that in any way come under the land office?
No.
And if not, do you have an opinion on how Texas
I do.
can?
As a matter of fact, we just filmed our newest fireside chat on exactly that subject. And here's where I probably differ from most of the talking heads and political pundits that's out there. These children that are coming are not immigrants. They're not illegal immigrants. They're not refugees either. What they're called technically in international terms is asylum seekers. And in my humble opinion, we need to treat them as such. People who are seeking political asylum because of the violence that's in their home communities. I mean, these children are being told, you either pay $75 a week or we're going to kill you. And if they don't, they kill them just to show that they can do it. These are very powerful drug-funded cartels that we're dealing with in Central America. All three of these countries in Central America are suffering from exactly the same problems. Abject poverty and very strong, powerful gangs that are controlled by drug cartels. So where do the drugs end up going? They come to this country. So number one, I think we have a responsibility to say, you know what, we've caused part of this problem as a nation. Our drug war has been unsuccessful. We've spent billions and billions of dollars on it. Maybe we should start focusing on what we do for economic and social development in these countries. I mean, we're reaching out to places like Iraq, Afghanistan, countries all over the world, and we would see a bigger impact on life in the United States by helping these countries to survive. That's the number one issue. The number two issue is the words on the Statue of Liberty. That entire sonnet that was added on that plaque, that was added to the Statue of Liberty after the French gave it to us. And we should take those words to heart. And we're talking about children here. Now, some of them are teenagers, but they're children. And anybody who has a child or a grandchild should try to look at these children in the same light. They went through a tremendous journey trying to get from their home country through Mexico and all the drug cartels and gangs that are there, trying to take advantage of them all the way. And they finally get here to the shores of liberty, justice, and prosperity. And what does our governor want to greet them with? Guns, rifles, drones, or Border Patrol agents. What happened to the words on the Statue of Liberty? Or maybe we should just take them off and say, you know what? We don't know how they ever got there, but that's not part of being an American. That's not part of being a Christian, and it's not part of being a